My wife was an Army colonel for 22 years, and 4 days after I buried her, her own mother stood on my porch with a lawyer and a handwritten list of everything she wanted out of my house, and I stood there in my socks and told her yes to every single thing on it. Hey, real fast, one question before anything else. What city are you in right now? Put it down in the comments, because I go through those and I pull names out and I say them out loud in the next video, and I'd like yours to be one of them. Thank you for giving me this time. I know you had other options. And the like, the subscribe, all that little stuff, that's honestly the only machinery keeping a channel this size running. Okay. So, her name was Marisa. Colonel Marisa Hollister. She died on a Thursday morning in September, when the Black Hawk she was riding in went into the sagebrush, out at the Yakima Training Center, out on the east side of the mountains where the Army does its big rotations. She wasn't even supposed to be on that bird. She swapped seats with a major who had a kid's soccer thing. That's the kind of person she was, and that's the kind of thing that will chew a hole through you at 2 in the morning for the rest of your life. 2 guys in dress blues came to my shop. I'm a diesel mechanic. I own a 2-bay shop on Pioneer Way in Puyallup, Washington, and I was under a Cummins with a flashlight in my teeth when my apprentice Trey tapped my boot and said, "Wes, you gotta come out here." I rolled out, and there were 2 soldiers standing in my bay in the good uniform, and every one of us in that shop knew what that meant before anybody said a word, because half of Pierce County is married to that base one way or another. The funeral was the following Tuesday. Full honors. They did it right. I'll give the Army that. They did every bit of it right. 21 guns, and the bugler, and that whole line of soldiers standing in the rain out at the cemetery with the rain just running off the brims of their covers, and not one of them flinching. And then the sergeant and the captain took the flag off her casket and they folded it. And you know how they do it. Slow. 13 folds, hands like they're handling a newborn. And the captain went down on one knee in the wet grass in front of me and put it in my hands and said the words about a grateful nation. And that's when I heard the folding chair go over. Loretta stood up in the second row. Loretta Kepler, Marisa's mother, 68 years old, big church hair, a black dress she'd bought new, and she came right down the aisle between the chairs, and she got maybe 4 feet from me, and she put her hand out, palm up, in front of everybody. In front of the general, in front of Marisa's whole brigade, in front of the honor guard who were still standing there at attention with rifles. And she said, "That's mine." The captain, God bless that young man, he said, "Ma'am," with a voice like a door closing. And she said it again, louder, "That is my daughter's flag." Her son Craig got her by the elbow and walked her back. And I just stood there in the rain, holding it against my chest like an idiot, with the rain coming down on the triangle of it. And I remember thinking, very clearly, we have not even put her in the ground yet. You want to know the part that still gets me? Marisa had not spoken to that woman in 6 years. 6 years. 6 whole years. And Loretta sat in the second row like she'd earned it. She had no idea that the thing she wanted most in this world, more than the house, more than the money, more than any of it, she was going to sign away with her own hand inside of 5 weeks. And I already knew it was coming, because of something sitting in my garage in a black plastic case. But let me get you there right. So, Friday, 4 days after we buried her. Doorbell goes at 9 in the morning. I hadn't slept. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table since about 3, and there's a thing nobody tells you about grief, which is that it makes you very calm and very stupid at the same time, like your body just runs on a pilot light. I opened the door in a t-shirt and gym shorts and socks. Loretta was on my porch. And behind her, 1 step down, was a guy in a grey suit with a leather portfolio, and he introduced himself as Gil Pruitt, and he said he represented the family. The family. Standing on my porch. That's how he opened. And Loretta walks past me, doesn't ask. Walks right into my living room like she pays the note on it, and she has a piece of yellow legal paper folded in quarters, and she unfolds it and starts reading, out loud. Like a grocery list, the flag, the shadow box with the medals, Marissa's dress blues, the saber, her bronze star and the citation with it, her ring from ROTC at Washington State, her deployment photo albums, all 4 of them, her grandmother's cedar chest, the truck, a 2020 Silverado I was still making payments on, the insurance, all of it, the house. And when she got to the house, she stopped and looked up at me over her reading glasses, and she said the sentence, the one that's been sitting in my head like a nail ever since. She said, "You were married 4 years, Wesley. I had her for 41. And Pruitt sort of half smiled and said it's a difficult situation for everyone, and he mentioned that his client had certain rights under Washington law, and he said the word separate property, and he let it sit there. And here's the thing. He was not entirely wrong, and I knew he was not entirely wrong, and that's what I want you to hold on to for the next 20 minutes, because everybody thinks these stories are about the good guy being obviously right. This one wasn't, not at the start. I stood there, and I looked at that yellow paper, and what I said was, okay. Loretta blinked at me. I said, okay, take it, take all of it. When do you want to come get it? Pruitt actually looked up from his portfolio at that. He was not expecting that. He had a whole speech loaded and I just took the pin out of it. Loretta's face did this thing, this little flicker, where for about a half second she was suspicious. And then greed just walked right over the top of it, and she said tomorrow, and I said tomorrow's fine, and I held the door open for both of them. Then I closed it, and I went into the kitchen. And I put my hands flat on the counter and I stood there for about 10 minutes breathing like a man who just ran up a hill. Because I'd already read the letter. All right, back up. Let me tell you who these people actually were, because otherwise none of this lands. I met Marissa in 2019. She brought me a Suburban that a chain shop in Lakewood had butchered, and she stood in my bay with her arms crossed, telling me exactly what she thought had been done wrong, and she was right about 80% of it, which for a customer is unheard of. She was a lieutenant colonel then. Battalion command. She had a way of standing that I can't describe. Not stiff, just settled, like the ground under her was hers. I was 42 and divorced and living in the apartment above my shop. She asked me out. Not the other way. She said, "Do you eat dinner?" And I said occasionally, and she said, "Good Friday," and walked out. We got married in 2021 at the Puyallup courthouse with 4 people there. Her friend Rel, Lieutenant Colonel Aurelia Diaz, was one of them. Rel had known her since Benning, back when they were both butter bars, and Rel is the reason I know half of what I know about my own wife. 4 years. That's what I got. 4 years and 11 days. Those 4 years were the best I've ever had, and they were also hard as hell. She deployed 9 months of it. She had a phone that rang at all hours, and I'd hear the truck start at 4 in the morning and I'd lie there. That's the deal. Everybody around here knows the deal. Now, Loretta. Rel said Loretta had been doing a version of this Marissa's whole life. Marissa sent money home for years. Every deployment, every jump in pay, some of it went to Puyallup. Loretta never once said thank you. She said it wasn't enough. Marissa bought her a car in 2014, and Loretta complained about the color for a decade. And Craig Kepler, the brother, 47, sold cars out on South Tacoma Way, and Craig had never in his life had a problem that wasn't somebody else's fault. Loretta thought the sun rose out of that man. And then 2019 happened, which is the year I met her, which is a coincidence I've thought about probably 10,000 times. Marissa was deployed, 9 months. And while she was gone, her mother took her signature. I'm going to say that plain. Loretta Kepler forged her deployed daughter's name on a power of attorney, walked into a notary at a shipping store in Spanaway with a woman from her church holding Marissa's expired driver's license, got it stamped, and used it to pull $58,000 out of a home equity line and 2 credit accounts. Marissa found out when she got home. She went to the Pierce County Sheriff and filed a report. And then, 11 days later, She withdrew it. I asked her about it once. We were in the driveway, and I asked why she didn't put her mother in prison, and she said, "Because I'd have to be the one who did it, and I don't want that to be a thing I am." And then she said something I didn't understand for 6 years. She said, "It's fine." I wrote it all down. I thought she meant like a diary, like feelings. She did not mean feelings. Okay, so Saturday, the day after the list, Loretta showed up at 9 with Craig and a U-Haul. Not a trailer, a truck, 20-footer. She'd rented a 20-foot truck to clean out my house, and I let her. I sat on my porch step with a cup of coffee, and I let her. They took the shadow box off my living room wall. They took the folded flag out of the case on the mantel, and I want to be clear, that was the flag off her casket. That was 4 days old, and Craig carried it out under his arm like a couch cushion. They took her uniforms off the hangers. They took the saber. They took the cedar chest with her grandmother's quilts in it and dropped one end of it coming off the step and put a gouge in it you could set a pencil in. Loretta came out with an armload of photo albums, and she stopped in front of me on the porch, and she said, "You can keep the pictures with you in them." She'd gone through them, in my hallway, pulling pictures out, and I said, "Okay, Loretta." And she said, "You're taking this very well." And I said, "I'm tired." And she smiled. She actually smiled. And she said, "You know, I never understood what she saw in you. Now here's what I want you to know. Every square foot of my property has cameras. Not because I'm paranoid, because I've had catalytic converters cut off customer trucks in my own lot twice, so I've got cameras on everything. The shop, the house, the driveway, all time-stamped, all backed up to a service I pay $11 a month for." Loretta Kepler cleaned out my house for 4 hours and 40 minutes on camera from 6 different angles. I didn't say anything. I just drank my coffee. They pulled out around 2, and I went inside, and my house was hollowed. The walls had those clean squares on them where the frames had been. And I sat down on the floor of my living room, on the actual floor, with my back against the couch, and I made a sound I've never made before or since, and then I got up and I went out to the garage. All right. The letter. Before her last deployment, Marissa did what a lot of them do, which is she made a just-in-case pile. Everybody in the military has a version of this. She had a black Pelican case, the hard kind, waterproof, with the latches, sitting on the shelf above the workbench under a shop towel, and taped to the top of it was a plain white envelope, and on the envelope in her handwriting, and her handwriting was terrible, it said Wes. Only if. She'd shown it to me the night before she left. She said, "If I don't come back, that's yours, and if I do come back, we never talk about it." And I said, "Don't be dramatic." And she said, "Wes, look at me." And she said, "Only if." Then she came back, and I forgot about it. The way you make yourself forget about a thing like that. I stood in my garage that Saturday night, and I got it down, and I sat on an upturned bucket, and I opened it. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, some of it's mine. But I'll read you the part that mattered. She wrote, "If you're reading this, then my mother is already in your life because she'll come. She won't be able to help it. She'll come with a list, and she'll come fast, and she'll bring Craig." She wrote, "Do not fight her at the door. That's what she wants. She's good at the door." She wrote, "Let her take whatever she wants. It's things. Let her." And then she wrote, "But she won't stop at things. She never stops at things. She'll go for paper. Paper is the only thing she's ever actually wanted. And when she goes for paper, open the case." And the last line before she signed it, she wrote, "I love you. Don't be a hero. Be patient. Be patient." So I opened the case. Inside, in manila folders labeled in her terrible handwriting, was every single thing from 2019. The forged power of attorney, the original, not a copy. A certified copy of the notary's journal page from that shipping store in Spanaway, because notaries in this state have to keep a journal. And it has a thumbprint line. And there is a thumbprint on that page that is not my wife's, because my wife was in the Middle East that week. The credit union's fraud letter, the sheriff's report with the case number and the withdrawal, and a 41-page report from a woman named Sondra Beale Whitcomb, a board-certified document examiner in Bellevue, that my wife paid $2,200 for out of her own pocket, with photographs blown up to where you can see the pen pressure, concluding that the signature on that power of attorney was written by the person whose known writing samples were labeled Exhibit K. Exhibit K was 14 samples of Loretta Kepler's handwriting. Christmas cards, a check, a church directory sign-in sheet. My wife built a case against her own mother and then put it in a box in the garage and never used it. I sat on that bucket until about 4 in the morning. Now I need to tell you why this was not already over, because if you're thinking, well, he's got her, he doesn't need any of this. No. Listen. Monday, I went to see an estate attorney in Puyallup named Jude Feeney, 60-something, reading glasses on a chain, office above a bakery so the whole place smells like sugar, which is a strange place to have the worst conversation of your life in. Jude read the yellow list. She read Pruitt's letter, and she took her glasses off and rubbed her eyes and said, "Okay, bad news first. Marissa bought that house in 2018, before me, which under Washington law makes it her separate property, not community property, and when somebody dies without a will in this state with no kids and a surviving parent, the spouse gets all the community property but only half of the separate. Half. Loretta had a real claim on half my house, and she knew it and Pruitt knew it, and that's why he'd said those 2 words on my porch, like he was laying down a trump card. Except Marissa had a will. She did it at the Legal Assistance Office out at Lewis McCord in 2021 during a pre-deployment processing line, the way thousands of them do, and it left everything to me, and it named Rel as backup executor. And Jude said, "And here's your problem." The will was witnessed by 2 soldiers, 2 young specialists who happened to be in that room that day. One of them had since gotten out, and nobody had a current address, and the other one was in Germany. And there was no self-proving affidavit attached to it, because in a processing line at 8 in the morning, things get missed. Which meant Loretta could contest it, and she'd have to be given the chance to, and this could go a year, and it could go either way. Jude said, "I want you to understand that we could lose this." I said, "How long she got to file?" Jude said 4 months from when it goes into probate. She filed in 9 days. Pierce County Superior Court. Under our Estate Dispute Act, the one everybody around here just calls TEDRA, which is the machinery for exactly this kind of family knife fight. Her petition said the will was the product of undue influence. It said, and I have this in front of me, it said that Wesley Hollister isolated the decedent from her family of origin and exploited her military benefits. Isolated her. The woman forged her name and took 58 grand, and Marissa cut her off, and that's my fault. And then, 3 weeks later, Pruitt filed the amended petition, and that's when it got really crazy. Because attached to the amended petition, as Exhibit A, was a will, a different will, 2 pages, typed, dated the 11th of August of this year, which is 3.5 weeks before my wife died. Signed Marissa L. Hollister at the bottom in blue ink. Witnessed by Craig Kepler and by a woman named Bernadette Vosberg, 66, of Loretta's church. Notarized. And it left everything, the house, the truck, the insurance, all of it, to Loretta Kepler. And it had a paragraph in it, paragraph 4. I've got it memorized. It said, "I intentionally make no provision for my husband Wesley Hollister, who has taken advantage of my service and my earnings, and who my family has warned me about since the beginning." I read that in Jude Feeney's office, and I had to go stand in the stairwell. That's my wife's name. On a piece of paper, saying she thought I was a leech. Jude came out and found me in the stairwell, and she said, Wes, look at me. That's not her." And I said, "I know it's not her, but it's got her name on it." And Jude said, "That's the point. That's exactly the point, because here's what a forged will does. It doesn't just make a claim. It makes a statement. Under oath, eventually. It puts a person's whole body behind a lie in a way you can measure. Marissa's words, in that letter, "She'll go for paper." So I did the thing that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I want you to appreciate it, because every cell in my body wanted to drive to that woman's house on 16th Street with the Pelican case in my hands and throw it in her face. I did nothing. Jude filed a bare-bones response, denied everything, gave them nothing, asked for a deposition. And I let Loretta believe she was winning for 4 more months. And oh, she believed it. She told her whole congregation that her daughter had come back to her at the end, that Marisa had called her in August, that they'd made peace. She got a standing ovation at a Sunday service. I have this from 3 separate people. She started going to the American Legion post out on Meridian, the one Marisa never once set foot in, and they put her at the head table twice. Somebody at the school district got in touch about naming a scholarship at Puyallup High after Marisa, and Loretta told them it should be the Marisa Kepler Memorial Scholarship. Kepler, not Hollister. That's what she wanted. I need you to understand that. It was never really about the money. Or it wasn't only that. What that woman wanted was to be the mother. Publicly, officially, on the plaque. She wanted the last 41 years back, and she wanted a room full of people to hand them to her. And I let her build the whole thing. 4 months. Every brick. February. Deposition. Pruitt's office in downtown Tacoma, a conference room on the 9th floor with a view of the water, and a court reporter and a videographer because Jude asked for video, and Pruitt said, sure, why not, because Pruitt still thought he was ahead. Loretta came in a purple suit, and Jude Feeney, who I have never once seen raise her voice, sat there with her hands folded and asked the softest questions you've ever heard for an hour and 10 minutes. Tell me about your daughter. Tell me about the reconciliation. And Loretta talked. God, she talked. She built the whole thing right there in that room, out loud, on video, under oath. Jude said, so you were present when she signed the will? Loretta said, I was sitting right across the table from her. Jude said, where? Loretta said, my kitchen. My house on 16th. Jude said, what day? Loretta said, August 11th. It was a Monday. She came at 10 in the morning. She had a cup of coffee. She was in her uniform, the green one, and she cried and she apologized to me, and she said, Mama, I was wrong, and she signed it right there, and Craig signed under her. The court reporter's keys clicking, Pruitt writing something down. And Jude said, thank you, and slid 1 sheet of paper across the table. It was a rear detachment sign-in roster from the Yakima Training Center. Marisa Hollister was signed in at Yakima at 0640 on August 11th, and she did not sign out until August 15th. It's 140 miles and a mountain pass away. Jude slid over the second sheet. Her travel voucher, government lodging, 4 nights on the east side. Third sheet, a photograph. Marisa on a range at Yakima at 11:14 in the morning on August 11th, in a helmet, in the dust, with a date stamp on it, standing next to a brigadier general. It's an official army photo. It's on a public website. Anybody can find it. My wife's alibi for the day she supposedly cried in her mother's kitchen was posted by the United States Army on the internet. Loretta looked at that photograph for a long time, and then she said, well, maybe it was a different day. Jude said, ma'am, you just testified it was a Monday and she had coffee and she was in her uniform. And Loretta said, I'm 68 years old. And Pruitt said, we're going to take a break. And Jude said, no, we're not. And she opened her bag, and she put the 2019 power of attorney on the table. I watched that woman's face when she saw it. I watched her go the color of the underside of a fish, because she knew exactly what that was, and she thought it was gone. She thought it had died 6 years ago in a drawer at the sheriff's office, and it had been sitting in my garage under a shop towel the entire time. Then Jude put down the notary journal page with the thumbprint on it, then the credit union letter, then Sondra Beale Whitcomb's report. And then Jude said the thing that ended it. She said, Mrs. Kepler, Ms. Beale Whitcomb has now examined the August 11th will. She's prepared a supplemental report. Her conclusion is that the signature reading Marissa L. Hollister on that document and the signature reading Marissa L. Kepler on the 2019 power of attorney were written by the same hand, and it wasn't your daughter's. Silence. 9 floors up, and you could hear a ferry horn out on the water. That's how quiet that room got. Pruitt asked for a recess, and this time he got one. He walked out with his client, and he did not come back into that room for 40 minutes, and when he did come back, he came back alone, and he told us he was withdrawing as counsel. Now Craig. Craig was noticed for a deposition 8 days later, and Craig did not make it that far. Craig cracked in a hallway. 2nd floor of the County City building in Tacoma, in front of the elevators, on a Thursday. I was there for a scheduling thing. He came off the elevator and saw me, and he had this look on him like a dog that already knows. He said, "Wes." I said, "Craig." He said, "I need you to know I didn't want to do it." And I just looked at him. I didn't say anything. That's the trick. And I learned it from my wife. She used to just wait. Silence does more work than any sentence you can build. And he filled it. He filled the whole thing. He stood there in a hallway with people walking past us to traffic court, and he said, "Mom typed it." He said she typed it on the computer at the library because she didn't want it on hers. He said she practiced the name. He said, "Wes." She practiced it. She had a legal pad. She must have done it 100 times, and she'd hold it up and say, "Does that look right? Does that look like Marissa?" He said Bernadette didn't know. Bernadette thought she was witnessing a car title. He said she told me it was fair. And then he said, "Is it too late to fix it?" And I said, "Craig, I don't know. Go tell your lawyer everything you just told me." He did. He signed a declaration 11 days later. Every word. And I'm supposed to say I felt vindicated. I didn't. I felt sick. That was my wife's brother. He gave a toast at our wedding that wasn't good, but he tried. The hearing was in March. Courtroom 2. Judge Renata Colvin. Loretta had new counsel by then, a young guy who I genuinely felt bad for because he had walked into a building that was already on fire. Jude put it all in. The deposition video, the roster, the photograph, Beale Whitcomb, who testified in person for 2 hours and was, and I mean this, a killer. Craig's declaration. And my ring footage, 4 hours and 40 minutes of Loretta Kepler carrying my dead wife's casket flag out of my house under her son's arm, which the judge watched about 9 minutes of, with her jaw set like a bench vise. And then Jude did the thing I hadn't known she was going to do. She offered the letter. The other side objected. Hearsay. And Jude argued it went to the decedent's state of mind toward her mother, which was directly at issue because Loretta's whole case was that they'd reconciled. And Judge Colvin thought about it for maybe 15 seconds and let it in. And she read part of it into the record. Out loud, in a public courtroom with the church people in the gallery, she read, "If you're reading this, then my mother is already in your life because she'll come." She read, "She'll go for paper. Paper is the only thing she's ever actually wanted." And she read the line I'd skipped when I told you about the letter earlier, because honestly, I wasn't ready. Marissa wrote, "People are going to tell you I should forgive her because she's my mother. She stopped being my mother in 2019. She's a woman I'm related to who I sent money to." I watched Loretta's face while a Superior Court judge read her daughter's real opinion of her out loud to a room with her pastor in it. That was it. That was the whole thing, not the money. That. Judge Colvin found the August 11th will was a forgery. She declared it void. She admitted Marissa's 2021 will, and I'll tell you how, because it's the kind of detail nobody believes. Rel found the witness. Lieutenant Colonel Aurelia Diaz spent a weekend on the phone and found a former specialist named Dion Prather working at a Costco outside Sacramento. And he remembered that morning, and he signed a declaration, and he drove up here on his own dime. And he sat in that courtroom in a polo shirt and said, "Yes, ma'am, I remember her. She was the only colonel in the line, and she let everybody go ahead of her." The judge granted me the estate, all of it. She ordered every item returned within 14 days, itemized off my own camera footage, and she used the phrase, and this is in the transcript, she used the phrase, egregious and calculated, and then she referred the whole file to the Pierce County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Forgery, attempted theft in the first degree, perjury in the first degree, because Loretta told that story about the kitchen and the coffee under oath on video, and there's no walking that back. Craig got charged too, and he pled. And he got a deferred deal because he came in and told the truth before anybody made him. I'm not going to sit here and tell you a 68-year-old woman got dragged out of that courtroom in cuffs. That's not how it works. It took another year. It's still going, honestly. There's a sentencing thing coming. But here's what happened in about 9 days. And this is the part that actually finished her. The Legion Post quietly took her off the head table. The church did that thing churches do, where nobody says anything but the invitations just stop. Bernadette Vosberg, who genuinely thought she'd witnessed a car title, does not speak to her. Craig doesn't speak to her. Her whole congregation had watched her stand up and cry about the daughter who came home to her at the end. And then they found out the daughter had been on a range in Yakima that whole week, and had written down 6 years earlier that her mother had stopped being her mother. The school district went ahead with the scholarship. I funded it. It's $10,000 a year to a kid from Puyallup High going into a trade or into ROTC, and I sat in the district office and they asked me what to call it. Pen ready, and I said the Colonel Marissa Hollister Memorial Scholarship, and the woman wrote it down and said what a lovely name, and I had to look out the window for a second. Hollister, not Kepler. Loretta Kepler wanted to be the mother on the plaque. She is not on the plaque. She is a case number. They brought the stuff back on a Tuesday. Craig brought it. 2 loads in his own truck, not a U-Haul, and he carried it all in himself and set it in my hallway, and he wouldn't look at me, and the last thing he carried was the flag, and he had it in both hands out in front of him. And he'd put it in a plastic grocery bag to keep the rain off it. And I don't know why that's the detail that got me, but it is. The cedar chest still has the gouge in it. I'm never fixing that. I put the shadow box back on the wall in the exact same spot. There was a clean square there waiting for it, so it lined right up, no measuring. And then I sat down on my couch in my house, and it was very, very quiet, and I noticed I was breathing all the way down, like all the way to the bottom, for the first time since a captain in dress blues knelt in the wet grass in front of me. My shoulders came down about 2 inches. I fell asleep sitting up at 4 in the afternoon like an old man, and I slept 11 hours. I still work at the shop. I've got the Silverado, and I still don't love driving it. It's too big for me. Rel comes over about once a month and tells me stories about Marissa at Benning that I've heard 4 times, and I let her tell them again because I want to hear them a 5th. Some nights I'm fine. Some nights I sit in the garage on that same bucket. Here's the only thing I really took out of any of it, and it's not clever, it's just true. My wife knew. She knew exactly who her mother was years before any of this, and she didn't do a thing about it. She just wrote it down and put it in a box and went back to work. And I used to think that was sad, like she'd given up. I don't think that anymore. She wasn't giving up, she was just refusing to spend her life on it. She had a job and she had me. And she had 11 days off a year, and she wasn't going to hand any of that to a woman who'd already taken enough. She just left the truth somewhere safe for whoever needed it later. That's all any of us can really do with people like that. You don't have to win against them. You don't have to convince them, or fix them, or get the apology because that's not coming. You just have to be able to put your hand on what's true when the day comes that somebody asks you to prove it. She told me to be patient. I hated it. It's the best advice anybody ever gave me. All right. That's it. Tell me your city down there.